Words matter, right? Setback? Is it really a setback? Or is it a tragedy? With me right now is MacLean, a combat Marine veteran and managing editor of the Washington Free Beacon. Thank you. Good to have you here. I would assume in your view this is a whole lot more than a setback.
Of course it is. You know, I think it's worth taking Josh Earnest at his word and look at the president's actions in addition to just his words. Of course, Elizabeth Hasselbeck is correct when she says that the president's words are concerning, but look at his actions in the aftermath of the Paris attack. He has added a smidge more energy to a strategy that everybody concedes is failing unless they work at the White House or at the NSC.
Energy, I want to stop you there even, because energy, it seems to be a political energy in my view, Aaron. I mean, this is what's so wrong about how the administration is approaching this right now, because they've immediately gone after anybody who suggests we shouldn't be opening the floodgates and bringing tens of thousands of refugees into this country. Somehow you're a bad person if you're not willing to welcome these refugees, despite the fact, Aaron, that ISIS has said and promised that they will populate the refugee populations with members of their jihadist group.
No, of course you're right, and the president only seems to get passionate when he's condemning Republicans. He seems sort of flat and disdainful and awfully thin-skinned when he's talking about terrorism itself. But you know, they say they've bolstered intelligence sharing with the French, which raises the question, why weren't we already sharing a lot of intelligence with them? We're striking targets like the oil sector right now in Syria. Why weren't we already striking it? So I think there's a little bit more energy being deployed, which raises the question, why wasn't it there already?
Why wasn't it there? Exactly, especially when we had the intelligence, Aaron. Already, I mean, there was an intelligence report back out in May, an unclassified intelligence report by Homeland Security that basically predicted something like this happening. I mean, they even cited the guy who's the mastermind of the whole thing, saying he was a problem, and yet somehow that information never was properly shared, and we never properly went about trying to prevent this from happening in the first place.
You know, in some ways, I think it's actually worse than that. Of course they knew. It's no surprise that they knew that something like Paris was coming. Anyone who's been paying attention, whether you have access to classified information or you're just reading in the newspapers, knew that something like Paris was possible. What's really shocking is that they've come to accept this possibility as the norm. They've come to accept that 100 people dead in Paris is a kind of new normal, and they're not going to change what they're doing. 100 dead in Paris won't get this administration to change course. And I'll tell you another thing, 100 dead in Washington or more, just as ISIS is threatening right now, also won't get them to change course. They are committed to a vision of American power where America is no longer the guarantor of security in the Middle East, where America pulls back and is one nation among many, and they're going to see that vision through, regardless of the consequences.
Well, you think about the consequences, and I'm going to politicize myself for a moment here and just point to the basics here, which is that most Americans are not with the administration on this one. So I look at what Hillary Clinton is doing, saying, no, we don't need 10,000, we need 65,000. I would up it even more. When I look at that, I just question sort of her political savviness in all this. I think on the one hand, they're trying to paint Republicans as big, bad, you know, non-inclusive people that dislike minorities, that dislike women, and this maybe helps feed into that. But on the other hand, Aaron, there's the reality that every American wants to be safe right now. And we all worry about our own kids. And so for her to say she wants to bring all of them in without really saying we need a better vetting process between now and January 1st, I question whether people are really going to rally behind her, whether regular, everyday folk American are going to rally behind her in that.
I think you're right to question that, Trish. I think it is a cynical ploy. The refugee debate that we're having right now. Every minute we're having this debate, the president is not being forced to be held accountable for the fact that his campaign against the Islamic State is failing. When you look at what they've done from a communications standpoint, it's really quite remarkable. Besides Bashar al-Assad and Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS, there is no one man on this earth right now more responsible for the Syrian refugee crisis than Barack Obama. Year after year, he has resisted taking action to bring the crisis in Syria to some sort of decisive conclusion. So there are millions of Syrian refugees who are destabilizing the European Union, but instead of being held accountable for that, instead of debating the causes of that, and instead of talking about how we're going to bring it to a close, we're now having a debate over a token number, 10,000 or so Syrian refugees that the president wants to resettle here, as he flies around the world belittling and mocking really, what, half the country, more than half the country, I think the polls show?
More than half the country, I think, feels right now. I think, you know, a lot of people, and when you really press them on this, they get a lot of questions. Aaron, good to have you here. Thank you very much. And
Thanks
yes, thank you for citing the root of the problem, which is that we allowed al-Assad to do what he did, and we are now confronting this reality of millions of refugees around the world. All right, President Obama, everyone, calling out